It's alive! It's alive!
Universal's Frankenstein was not just the birth of an icon. It was the collision of broken bodies, censored dreams, and one actor who literally destroyed himself to give life to a monster. These are 20 weird facts about Frankenstein, and if you stay until the end, I will reveal the bonus fact about what Boris Karloff secretly did off camera that kept his co-star from having a complete breakdown during her most terrifying scene. Let's dig up some bodies. Number 16. Boris Karloff destroyed his back and never recovered. The windmill climax nearly killed Boris Karloff. Not figuratively. Actually, physically broke him. Director James Whale insisted on authenticity for those final shots where the monster carries Dr. Frankenstein up the mountainside and through the burning mill. No stunt doubles, no camera tricks. Boris Karloff, at 43 years old, wearing a 48-pound costume with 13-pound boots, actually carried Clive in his arms. For hours, over several days. The monster was not supposed to be real, but Karloff's suffering absolutely was. The padding, the back brace built into the costume, the makeup restricting his movement, it all compressed against his spine with Clive's weight on top. Karloff felt something give during filming. Sharp pain that would not quit. He said nothing, did not complain, finished the scenes. 3 back surgeries followed, none of them worked completely. For the rest of his life, Boris Karloff lived with chronic pain from playing the monster. He would return to the role twice more, and each time the damage compounded. The man who became cinema's most famous monster quite literally sacrificed his body for the part. When he died in 1969, he still carried the physical scars of those windmill scenes. The monster destroyed its creator on screen. Off screen, the role destroyed the actor who played him. Number 15. Clive was an alcoholic playing a mad scientist. Clive's electrifying performance as Henry Frankenstein was not acting. It was autobiography. The man screaming about knowing what it feels like to be God was battling demons that would kill him before he turned 38. Clive was a severe, chronic alcoholic. James Whale specifically cast him because Whale was fascinated by the idea of having a real alcoholic play tormented roles. It worked devastatingly well. On set, Clive sometimes needed to be physically held upright for shots. He would arrive drunk or violently hungover. His mood swings alienated cast members. His hands shook. But when the cameras rolled, that cracked baritone voice and that measured intensity made Henry Frankenstein unforgettable. The obsession you see on screen was real. In 1934, during the filming of The Firebird, Clive suffered a complete alcoholic breakdown on set and had to be replaced by Lionel Atwill. By 1937, tuberculosis ravaged his alcohol-weakened body. He died on June 20. 5th, 6 years after Frankenstein made him famous. He was 37 years old. His ashes sat unclaimed in a funeral home basement for over 40 years before finally being scattered at sea in 1978. His wife never attended his funeral. When she wrote her memoir years later, she did not mention him once. Number 14. The drowning scene was censored for 54 years. The little girl floating in the lake is one of cinema's most haunting images, except you did not see it, not for decades. Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and New York censorship boards immediately cut the scene's conclusion upon the film's 1931 release. For 54 years, audiences only saw the monster approach the girl, then cut to her father carrying her corpse through town. The censors thought they were protecting audiences from trauma. Instead, they created something infinitely more disturbing. Without seeing the monster's innocent confusion when Maria does not float like the flowers, without witnessing his visible distress when she goes under, the edited version looks like deliberate murder. A monster picking up a child and then cut to her dead body. The censors transformed a tragic accident into what appeared to be calculated violence. Audiences assumed the worst. The scene's power twisted into something uglier than intended. When Universal reissued the film in 1938 under stricter production code enforcement, they cut directly from the camera negative. The footage was considered lost forever, but in the mid-1980s, a print surfaced. The scene was finally restored for home video releases. Number 13. Bela Lugosi rejected the monster role. Fresh off his triumph as Dracula, Bela Lugosi was Universal's first choice for the monster. Not just considered, officially announced in April 1931. Newspapers ran advertisements with his name attached. Lugosi did a 20-minute screen test directed by Robert Florey on the Dracula set. Edward Van Sloan remembered Lugosi's makeup resembled the Golem. When Carl Laemmle Jr. saw the test footage, he reportedly laughed like a hyena. Not because it was funny, because it was not scary, but Lugosi had already rejected the role in his heart. The accomplished Hungarian stage actor refused to play a mute, lumbering creature. His signature accent had made him a star. This role had no dialogue, no chance to showcase his theatrical training. Some sources suggest Lugosi deliberately sabotaged his own screen test, bumbling through it with an air of arrogance. The studio kicked him off the project even as his name remained in promotional materials. People showed up to the New York premiere expecting to see Bela Lugosi. They got Boris Karloff instead, credited only as Lugosi spent the rest of his career watching Karloff become the king of monsters with the role he had rejected. The two appeared in 5 films together. Lugosi always got second billing. The rivalry, real or studio manufactured, became Hollywood legend. Lugosi finally played the monster in 1943's Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. His line readings were so bad. Every word of dialogue was cut from the film. Number 12, Boris Karloff was not even invited to the premiere. Universal Studios knew Karloff was scary. They just did not know he would become immortal. So little did they value his contribution that Karloff was not invited to the film's New York premiere. The studio listed him in opening credits as just continuing the stage tradition. His name appears only in the end credits, which was highly unusual for 1931. Studio executives thought the role was so peripheral that the actor playing it did not matter. They were catastrophically wrong. The moment Karloff backs into the room and slowly turns to face the camera, then Wales cuts thrust viewers closer and closer to Jack Pierce's flawless makeup. It is one of the great entrances in cinema history. Critics immediately singled out Karloff's performance. The New York Times declared the makeup department had a triumph, but it was Karloff's soulful eyes, his careful physicality, his ability to convey confusion and rage without words that made the monster iconic. Letters poured into Universal for Karloff, hundreds of them, all expressing sympathy for the monster, offering him help and friendship. Boris Karloff, the unknown character actor who had been grinding through bit parts for years, called it one of the most moving experiences of my life. The studio quickly realized their mistake. Karloff became a star overnight. Number 11. The makeup process took 5 hours a day. Every morning, Boris Karloff woke at 3:30 a.m. to sit in Jack Pierce's chair, not for a few minutes, for 4 to 5 hours. Pierce refused to use latex appliances or molds. Instead, he built the monster's face from scratch every single day. The collodion, a liquid plastic that dried into a skin-like coating, made Karloff's eyes water and his head spin. The substance was also highly flammable. When torches got thrust at the monster's face during filming, Karloff's fear was sometimes real. Pierce shaded Karloff's right cheek after the actor removed his dental bridge. The sunken, gaunt look you see on screen exists because Karloff was missing molars. Pierce gave the monster heavy, drooping eyelids, made from mortician's wax. The flat-topped head was built up with cotton and collodion. Every scar, every stitch, every wrinkle. The same design, never deviating. Then came the neck bolts. Not bolts, actually, silver electrodes glued to Karloff's neck with tough spirit gum. Every morning, Pierce secured them. Every evening, he ripped them off. The removal process was agonizing. The adhesive tore at Karloff's skin. Day after day, week after week, those electrodes left scars on Boris Karloff's neck that remained visible for the rest of his life. Permanent marks from a temporary monster. After a full day of shooting in the 48-pound costume under hot lights, Karloff faced another several hours of removal. The torture became so unbearable that Karloff sometimes slept with the makeup on, his head braced between 2 books so he would not roll over and damage Pierce's work. Number 10, Kansas wanted to cut 32 scenes. Censorship did not just trim Frankenstein, it nearly butchered it. The Kansas Censorship Board submitted a request to cut 32 scenes from the 70-minute film. If Universal had complied, audiences in Kansas would have watched a 35-minute feature. Half the movie gone. The Studio Relations Committee sent censor Representative Joseph Breen to Kansas specifically to beg them to reconsider. An entire diplomatic mission to save Frankenstein from being sliced into incomprehensibility. Kansas was not alone in its moral panic. Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and New York all demanded the drowning scene be cut. Those same states also objected to Dr. Frankenstein's exclamation during the creation sequence. Multiple censorship boards considered the film's central premise too blasphemous for public consumption. The line, "Now I know what it feels like to be God," was cut from most prints and replaced with a thunder crack. When the film was reissued in 1938 under stricter production code enforcement, Universal made the cuts directly from the camera negative. The original footage was lost for decades. Internationally, the backlash was even more severe. The Irish Free State banned Frankenstein on February 5, 1932, declaring it demoralizing and unsuitable for children or nervous people. The appeal board overturned the ban a month later, but Northern Ireland, Quebec, Sweden, Italy, and Czechoslovakia successfully banned it outright. China classified it as a superstitious film due to its strangeness and unscientific elements. Hungary, Palestine, and Trinidad joined the ban list. Sweden wanted to cut 25 scenes. Number 9. Now I Know What It Feels Like to Be God was considered blasphemy. Colin Clive's most famous line was not "It is alive." It was the one censors desperately tried to erase. When the monster's hand first moves, Henry Frankenstein staggers back in delirious triumph and shouts, "It is alive! It is alive! In the name of God! Now I know what it feels like to be God." That final declaration sent censorship boards into absolute meltdown. Multiple states demanded it be removed immediately. They considered it blasphemy. The line struck at the core of what made Frankenstein dangerous to 1931 audiences. This was not just horror. It was a scientist explicitly replacing God's role in creation, then having the audacity to say it out loud. Mary Shelley's novel examined that hubris, but the stage play and Wales film made it visceral. Here was a man, covered in grave dirt and surrounded by electrical equipment, screaming about godhood while his creature twitched to life on a slab. The religious implications were unavoidable. When Universal reissued Frankenstein in 1938, they cut the line from the camera negative. A loud clap of thunder replaced Clive's voice. Subsequent prints became garbled. The line remained obscured for decades, thunder drowning out what Colin Clive actually said. Number 8. The ending you know never happened. All right, go ahead and like and subscribe because what I'm about to tell you will make you question every happy ending you have ever seen. The original script and initial filming had Henry Frankenstein dying in the windmill fire alongside his monster, both creator and creation consumed by flames. A tragic, thematically perfect conclusion. Test audiences hated it. Universal panicked and demanded reshoots for a happy ending. There was one problem. By the time Universal decided to change the ending, Colin Clive had already returned to Europe. He was gone, unavailable, so Universal hired another actor to stand in for Clive in the final bedroom scene. That long shot where Henry's father toasts to a future grandchild? The man in the bed playing the recovering Dr. Frankenstein is not Colin Clive. Tradition holds it was Robert Livingston, a future cowboy star. Nobody confirmed it definitively, but whoever it was, it definitely was not the movie's actual lead. Here is where it gets even stranger. When Universal made Bride of Frankenstein 4 years later, they ignored their own happy ending. The sequel opens immediately after the original script's darker ending, so Universal reissued the original Frankenstein with that ending restored, contradicting the happy version they had forced into theaters in 1931. The film played that way in all subsequent theatrical releases during the classic Hollywood era. Number 7. The film saved Universal Studios from bankruptcy. In 1930, Universal Studios lost $2.2 million. The Great Depression was obliterating the entertainment industry, movie theaters were closing, studios were collapsing, Universal was circling the drain. Then Dracula opened on February 12, 1931, and within 48 hours sold 50,000 tickets at New York's Roxy Theater, eventually earning a $700,000 profit. Carl Laemmle Jr., the 23-year-old head of production whose father had given him the job as a 21st birthday present, immediately greenlit more horror films. Frankenstein was rushed into production. Shot in about 6 weeks between August 24 and October 3, 1931, with a budget of $291,000, Frankenstein opened just before Thanksgiving. Within 1 week at New York's Mayfair Theater, it grossed $53,000. The film became the must-see holiday movie of 1931. By June 1932, it had earned $1.4 million in rentals. By 1943, Universal reported a profit of $708,871 from the original run. But the real money came from re-releases. By 1953, all Frankenstein re-releases combined had earned an estimated profit of $12 million. Those numbers do not just represent success, they represent survival. Without Dracula and Frankenstein, Universal Studios would not exist. The monsters quite literally saved the studio. That is why Universal kept making them. The Mummy in 1932, The Invisible Man in 1933, Bride of Frankenstein in 1935, and on through the 1940s. The monsters became Universal's identity. Number 6. Mae Clarke had a nervous breakdown after filming. Mae Clarke's performance as Elizabeth is understated, sweet, the normal human grounding. Henry Frankenstein's obsession. Behind the scenes, Clarke was falling apart. She had developed intense feelings for Clive during production. Not a casual crush, something deeper, more consuming. James Whale had chosen Clarke for the role without hesitation, but nobody anticipated the emotional toll the production would take on her. Clarke confessed to Boris Karloff that she was genuinely frightened to see him in full monster makeup during their scene together. She worried she would be too scared to act. Karloff, ever the gentleman, promised her something. Throughout the entire scene where the monster stalks Elizabeth in her bedroom, Karloff kept his pinky finger wiggling out of sight of the camera. A small gesture, a reminder. Despite the terrifying makeup and the scene's intensity, Mae Clarke could always see her friend Boris waving at her, letting her know she was safe. But the comfort Boris provided could not solve everything else. Clarke's feelings for Clive intensified during production. Clive, battling his own demons with alcohol and trapped in a distant marriage to actress Jane de Casalis, could not or would not reciprocate. When filming wrapped, Mae Clarke suffered a complete nervous breakdown. She was committed to a sanitarium to recover. She never got over her feelings for Clive. Decades later, in a 1985 interview, Clarke called Clive the dearest, kindest man who gave you importance. The warmth in her voice remained. So did the heartbreak. Number 5. Karloff lost 25 pounds during filming. The monster was not just makeup and costume, it was physical devastation. Boris Karloff entered production at his normal weight. 6 weeks later, he had lost 25 pounds. The 48-pound costume included the shoulder-padded jacket, the back brace built into the design, the 13-pound platform boots, and layers of padding to create the monster's bulk. Under August and September, heat and studio lights, Karloff was essentially wearing a sweatsuit designed by someone who hated him. Each day started with 4 to 5 hours of makeup application, then a full day of shooting in the suffocating costume, then several more hours of painful makeup removal. Karloff barely had time to eat. When he did, the collodion on his face made swallowing uncomfortable. The heavy eyelids restricted his vision. The costume made every movement laborious. And that is before factoring in carrying Clive up fake mountainsides and through mill sets for the climax. Sarah Karloff, Boris's daughter, later confirmed the weight loss. She had grown up hearing stories about what her father endured for the role. 25 pounds off a man who was not particularly heavy to begin with. The physical transformation was so severe that some have joked it was the horror movie diet plan. Karloff suffered it all without complaint. No demands for lighter costumes or shorter shooting days. He simply showed up, endured, and delivered one of cinema's greatest performances. The monster looked massive on screen. The man playing him was literally shrinking. Number 4. Marilyn Harris, the little girl, could not really swim. The drowning scene's power comes from its simplicity. Little Maria and the monster sitting by a lake, tossing flowers into the water, watching them float. Child actress Marilyn Harris, playing Maria, had done several takes. None worked quite right. James Whale was frustrated. Harris was exhausted, wet, and increasingly tired. The scene required her to go into the water, and the DVD commentary reveals a disturbing truth. She had only had a couple of swimming lessons before filming. She had never dived underwater before. Whale needed one more take. He turned to the soaked, exhausted child actress and made a promise. Do this one last take perfectly, and I will give you anything you want. Marilyn Harris thought about it, then told Whale she wanted a dozen hard-boiled eggs, her favorite snack. Whale agreed. The cameras rolled. Harris went into the water. The monster threw her in. She sank. The scene that appears in the finished film. Marilyn Harris, struggling swimmer, doing the drowning scene for a dozen hard-boiled eggs. Whale was so pleased, he gave her 2 dozen. The scene that censors cut for 54 years, that parents warned their children about, that became one of cinema's most controversial moments. Number 3, the electrical equipment used actual Tesla coils. Kenneth Strickfaden designed the electrical effects for Frankenstein's laboratory. Those crackling arcs of electricity, the spinning generators, the humming machinery that gave life to the monster. Strickfaden's equipment became so iconic that the devices are still referred to by monster fans as Strickfadens. But the most remarkable detail is this. Strickfaden managed to secure at least one Tesla coil built by Nikola Tesla himself, not a replica, not an approximation, an actual device constructed by the legendary inventor. The creation scene's power comes from those effects. When lightning strikes the laboratory, when electricity courses through the monster's body, when Henry Frankenstein screams about harnessing the power of creation. Strickfaden doubled for Karloff during the creation sequence because Karloff was afraid of being burned. Smart decision. The high voltage arc scissors through white hot bits of metal when activated. Karloff's abdomen was partially exposed during the scene, covered only by a surgical drape. If those sparks had hit him, he would have been seriously injured. The equipment proved timeless. Number 2, the makeup was copyrighted. Jack Pierce created the monster's look, the flat top head, the neck bolts, the droopy eyelids, the poorly fitted suit, the whole iconic image. It was not in Shelley's novel. It came entirely from Pierce's imagination and anatomical research. And Universal Studios copyrighted it. That design is intellectual property. Any future Frankenstein film featuring the flat head, neck bolts, or droopy eyelids is taking inspiration from Pierce's 1931 makeup work. Universal has held copyright on that design for decades, with protection extending until at least 2026 under various copyright renewals and extensions. This means Pierce's creation is more legally protected than Mary Shelley's actual story. Shelley's Frankenstein is public domain. Anyone can adapt it, but adapt it with a flat-headed monster with bolts in his neck? That is Universal's monster. The Munsters, Young Frankenstein, countless Halloween costumes, they all reference Pierce's design, not Shelley's description. Pierce essentially created the visual shorthand for Frankenstein's monster that has persisted for over 90 years. Pierce developed the look after months of research into anatomy, surgery, criminology, burial customs, and electrodynamics. He conceptualized the flat head as the simplest way a non-practicing surgeon would open a skull, straight across like a pot lid, hinged, brain inserted, clamped shut. The neck bolts served as electrical inlets. The ashen color came from green grease paint photographed in black and white. Every detail had a justification. Pierce refused to use molds or appliances, building the makeup fresh every day. That obsessive dedication created something so perfect, so definitive, that it became copyrightable. The irony is perfect. Mary Shelley wrote about a man who creates life from death. Jack Pierce created an image so alive that it outlived him, outlived the film, outlived the copyright periods, and still continues breathing in popular culture. The monster was supposed to be cobbled together from corpses. Pierce's design was cobbled together from wax, cotton, and green paint. Both became immortal. One through fiction, one through copyright law. Number 1, the famous "It is alive." Line is number 49 on A.F. Wine's greatest movie quotes list. It is alive. It is alive. Colin Clive's maniacal delivery of those words ranks number 49 on the American Film Institute's list of the 100 greatest movie quotes of all time. Not the monster's silence, not Boris Karloff's eyes. The scientist's ecstatic declaration that he has conquered death. James Whale understood that Frankenstein is not about the monster. It is about the act of creation. It is about a man so obsessed with playing God that he does not stop to ask if he should. That moment when life sparks in dead tissue, when the impossible becomes real, when scientific hubris transforms into horrified realization, that is the story. Colin Clive, battling his own demons off camera, channeled something raw and desperate into that performance. His voice cracks. His body convulses. He is not acting like a scientist who has succeeded. He is acting like an addict who has just mainlined his ultimate high. The AFI recognition validates what audiences knew in 1931. This is not just a horror movie, it is a film about human ambition, about the gap between what we can do and what we should do, about creation and consequence. It is alive, is not a celebration, it is a warning, and it has been warning us for 93 years. Every modern mad scientist, every genetic engineer in sci-fi films, every character who plays with forces beyond their control, they are echoing Colin Clive's voice. The line endures because the fear endures. What happens when we succeed at things we should not attempt? Frankenstein asked that question in 1931. We still do not have a good answer. Frankenstein was not supposed to work. A rushed production, a rejected star, a controversial script, censorship battles, an alcoholic lead actor, a physically punishing makeup process, and a monster played by a nobody who was not even invited to the premiere. By every measure, this film should have been a disaster. Instead, it saved Universal Studios, defined horror cinema for generations, created an immortal icon, and launched Boris Karloff into legend. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button, because if you think these 20 facts about Frankenstein were wild, wait until you see what we have got buried in the laboratory for next week. Trust me, it is alive.